Gregg, talking about client feedback and using it to grow your business. As you can see by the webcams and within the marketing beforehand, we're really trying a different format today to try to make it as interactive as possible. So you will see on the slides what Leslie is forwarding, so I'll ask her to forward the slide. We are going to have interaction between Leslie and Eric throughout. So Eric will lead some questions related to marketing, and Leslie will share some questions with Eric on really the best practices on using client feedback and developing your surveys. We'll then ask you some questions throughout with polls, so get ready. If you see on the right-hand side of the GoToWebinar box, there is a poll function, and I'll make those live throughout. You can also tweet your questions to either ClearEdge Marketing or Inavero, as you see the handles here. So we appreciate you joining us with this new format, and we look forward to your questions throughout. If you can go to the next slide, Leslie, I can give a little bit more detail on really you as our speaker and Eric. So Leslie is the CEO and founder of ClearEdge Marketing and has over 18 years of marketing experience working with B2B professional service firms. So I know we have a variety of firms on the phone, from staffing to technology to accounting, so we're excited to hear how client feedback can help all of you. She is also the co-founder of ARA, which is an organization founded here in Chicago to mentor, both for mentoring and to attract, retain, and advance women in technology. Eric is the CEO and founder of Inavero. They provide satisfaction surveys to the professional services industry, everything from legal firms to architecture to accounting, insurance, and staffing. And they work with over 300 professional service firms, analyzing over 500,000 surveys a year. So there's a broad degree of industry experience that they'll both be sharing today. In the conversation, and really again want to thank you for joining us for what we hope will be a back and forth conversation between Eric and Leslie. We're going to talk about first designing the survey in a way that's going to get you that data that you want. So how do you get high survey response rates? How do you identify problems that you can help solve throughout either maybe they're operational or marketing or service, but how do you use this data to help solve some of those problems? And then Leslie will talk about how you make that data actionable and use it. We're mostly focused on the testimonials and the strong relationships with your promoters, but also how to handle some of those negative messages. So I would now like to first kick it over to Eric, who's going to set the stage for the conversation. And remember throughout that you can ask questions on the sidebar, or if you want to tweet us, we'll be answering those questions.
Thanks, Leah, and thank you everybody for joining today. I just kind of want to set the stage with sort of how we look at the experience portion of your business today and how that's changed dramatically in the last handful of years. And I think to illustrate that, I want to point to a study that was done in 2012 by Nielsen. It's their Global Trust in Advertising study. And the study asked a simple question, which was, which of the following resources do you trust when it comes to making decisions about products or services? And they've asked this question historically over a long period of time. And what they found at the top is a referral from people that you know is the most trusted resource. And that makes a ton of sense. 92% of people trust a referral from someone they know. But what's interesting, what I want to draw your attention to, is that the second most trusted resource as of 2012 was unknown peer-level reviewers. And this is really fascinating, and it really plays into the B2B space as well, because what this is showing us, at 70%, literally nearly 3 times that of what an expert would get in terms of trust, it's telling us that we have an opportunity now to really tell our story through the experience that we provide. And we really also have not just an opportunity, but a responsibility, because the distance between what people say they do and the experience they provide and what they actually provide people is shortening all the time. It used to be that you could cover up a little bit service issues or quality issues or product-related issues with really strong marketing, really strong sales strategy and communication. But the fact of the matter is that not only are consumers in all industries asking for, shouting for, demanding transparency, they also have more tools at their disposal to determine whether what we tell them about their experience is actually accurate or not. And that really sets the stage for everything we're talking about today, which is, number one, how do you start to collect this information and gather this information and make sure that you're delivering the service. But then I'm thrilled, because I talk about that a lot, but I'm thrilled to really be able to leverage Leslie's experience as well, because that second piece of it is now more important than ever. How do you turn your clients, your customers, into storytellers? So that really just kind of sets the stage for how Leslie and I and our two organizations view this. So Leslie, I'll turn it over to you, and you can kind of start by asking me some of the questions here related to the survey process, and then we'll switch gears and we'll talk about how to maximize that.
Sure, perfect. Thanks, Eric, and hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We do a lot of client satisfaction surveys and know of companies who do them, but the very first question they ask is, why should I do this survey? What's the reason behind it? And it's interesting because they'll say, I just don't have enough time, or I really know why, what my clients think, or I'm pretty in tune with it. But usually that kind of internal perspective it's not always accurate. So the why often is just that validation. So why don't you share with us, the best reasons as to why you think that people should be starting a survey program if they're not already doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, as you look at this, you have a couple of things in play. The first of which is just ensuring the service experience across the board, especially in a B2B space. The service experience drives so much of what we see in terms of selection of firms to work with, as well as driving sort of the retention pieces of that. So the first thing is pretty point blank to be able to do that. But you hit on a really important topic, which I think is key to talk through. And one of the biggest objections that we get a lot of times internally is, well, my sales reps or my brokers should be out having that conversation, and they should know how our customers feel about us. But the problem with that is that, number one, you don't get any sort of company-wide learning. And number two, the problem with that is that you have a vested interest as the front line to be able to point to things if something's going wrong that are outside of your control. And it's not necessarily that they're actively trying to lie or to mismanage what is happening there. What it is just human nature. We tend to look through the lens we look through, and if you're not open to getting that perspective from other places and understanding that the perception of our customers is really the only thing that matters, you're going to end up getting blindsided. And it may be blindsided in terms of one of your largest customers or clients going somewhere else, or maybe blindsided in terms of not recognizing the anchor that you have on growth because you're not retaining the clientele or growing those accounts in the way that you could be otherwise. So those are really big reasons. And then if you go to the next slide, you can see, too, as we look at this retention, and anybody here, we have a few people on the webinar from financial services. This is not a new concept from a financial services standpoint. This is just simply the value of compounding growth. If you can improve your retention slightly, if you can grow counts at a slightly higher rate than you are doing it now, you look at the difference over a 5-year span. We did this in the accounting industry, this analysis in the accounting industry. It holds true across really most any B2B industry where you have long-term valuable clients as you look at that. So those are really the multiple reasons that you look at that. And then the other piece, which we're going to get to later, but I want to say now because it is really important, the other piece is that most everybody sells on service to some degree, yet it's not a differentiator unless you can show people and actually show people, not tell them, show people how you do it differently. And that's going to be a lot of what we talk about when I turn the tables and start asking you the questions.
Oh, good. Excellent. Look forward to the conversation. Well, I guess with that transition, you know, there's definitely a lot of reasons why you should be doing it, and I know a lot of people will do kind of ad hoc surveys, or they'll get in a good groove and do it, you know, for a couple of years in a row, and then it just falls off. So even though they're getting really great data, they're not keeping up with it. So that can often be a challenge, which I think in automating it, it definitely helps take that burden off the company, I guess, doing that and still getting the good data. Just for curiosity's sake with the group here, and we have several polls built throughout the presentation just to make sure it's interactive. And Leah, if you wouldn't mind launching the first poll, essentially the question is, how often are you surveying your customers on their experience with you? And it's monthly, quarterly, annually, ad hoc, or never. So let's see where you guys are all sitting in here.
Yeah, so I have about half the attendees have voted. If you look at your screen, you should be able to select something. And we'll wait maybe a couple more seconds and see if we can get any more responses. So far, it's ad hoc is winning, followed by quarterly and monthly for a tie. And we'll close.
That actually opens up something that I think is really important for us to talk about, which is how to determine what the right cadence is. And the ad hoc side of it is actually where most of our clients, when they come to us, start. And it's usually when we start that conversation, it's because they recognize, look, we need to do something a little bit more often. And our perspective on that is really that the right cadence depends a lot on how you're set up internally. It depends a lot on how transactional your business is. But there's really pros and cons to both sides of that. So if you're looking on an annual basis, the benefit of that is that you're collecting experiences across different touch points and different points within the life cycle. However, you lose some of that real-time relevancy. Whereas if you're on a monthly or a quarterly basis, you get a little bit closer to when the service was actually delivered, and that can be helpful as well.
So you were right, Eric. 33% of the attendees are doing it on an ad hoc basis, and then it's tied at 22% doing it monthly, 22% doing it quarterly, 17% annually, and 6% are still not doing it.
Okay, interesting. And the one thing here, and Eric, I know you and I have worked together on even another scenario here for a client of ours who does project-based work in the project management. Basically, they place PMs and BAs on specific assignments and projects. And they're actually doing transactional surveys where it's after every single client engagement ends, they're doing a survey. So kind of going back to more ad hoc, not being, once and then not doing it for another couple of years. It's ad hoc in the sense that it's very specific. They want to know the satisfaction right after that engagement or that project ends, but they also want to look and see is there opportunity, obviously for improvement and whatnot, but when you had talked about earlier too, opportunities for growth within an account and driving that business. Sometimes if you just stay on top of it and they see that you're interested in regularly surveying, that, you can actually get some additional business and watch your business grow from that as well. So there's also that kind of transactional piece too. So I guess when, there's 6% of people who aren't doing it on the call today, but even those who are doing it, ad hoc or monthly or quarterly, there's still a lot to be learned from best practices of doing surveys and what should be included and how much content to include and should you give deadlines and what type of things to use to ensure its success. So why don't you share with us, Eric, some of the best practices that you suggest?
Yeah, so that's probably one of the biggest areas that we see when people have an existing program. If they're unhappy with it, it's because they've lost engagement. And that may be that they've lost engagement with internal employees and staff. It may be that they've lost engagement and they're not getting the responses that they need. Or it may mean that they've lost engagement with the data as it comes in. And that's one of the big challenges if you are going to go with anything that's automated triggered, or if it's anything that is going to go really, really often. You have to do a lot to keep it top of mind internally. If you only go out once a year, it's hard to really build a culture around service based on that feedback. But it's also hard if you're going out every single day or weekly to keep it top of mind with people. And so that's one of the big challenges that you have. So let's talk about engagement and increasing engagement in the form of response rate. Some of the things that you can do there, and what you see on the screen here is just an example that shows some of the biggest mistakes that we see people make and how to avoid that. The first is the greeting on that. And what we have found is that the more the greeting looks like it's coming and it's a personal email sent from an individual, the higher your response rate is going to be. The example that we give to people is that there is nothing that says that you're not a valued customer like an email that says, "Dear valued customer." How valued can you be if you don't even know my name? And so you need to personalize that to start with. And that means that your data has to be clean to go with. We've had some nightmare experiences, and Leah, you know some of the ones that I'm talking about on this, and Leslie, you've seen a few of them as well, where first name people will put in their database, do not call, or deceased, or this person's a jerk. So you have to make sure that your CRM is clean, or that you have a process in place to clean that if you're going to personalize it. But the personalization is absolutely key to getting an above-average response. The second thing that's really important is to put the link to the survey up at the top. And this is something that we as marketers have a tendency to overestimate the importance of our words and the impact that they have in persuading someone to participate. For the most part, if you do things right and you can get people to open the survey, a lot of them have already made up their mind they want to take the survey. So don't make them read through a lot of your text before they get back to the actual call to action. The further up on the page the call to action, the better. The incentive can actually play a big role as well. Most of the time, if you have an ongoing engaged clientele or customer base, you can actually get them to respond without having an external incentive. However, it doesn't hurt, and it's a nice goodwill thing. One of the things that we found, certainly within professional services and in the B2B space, is if you do a drawing for a donation to a charity, that tends to really align you with something that really most everybody can kind of get on board with. Everybody's got at least one charity that they feel passionate about, and so that really gives you a nice opportunity there. One thing that we don't show here, but it is really critical, is that subject line. And as market researchers, we are a bunch of damn liars, and we have ruined our credibility. Nobody believes us when we say, here's a short questionnaire, please take a few minutes of your time. People see right through that now because as an industry, we've not been credible on that. We say it's a short questionnaire, and then 15 minutes later, you're still going. So our advice is to keep your survey itself less than 10 questions in length, and then in your subject line, put the number of questions in there. So an example might be, 7 questions about your recent experience with us. That might be a subject line that would work, because at that point, you're letting people know, we want your feedback, we value your feedback, but we're not going to take a lot of your time.
That's fantastic. I mean, 2 things really stand out to me here, Eric, that you're mentioning just in our experience. One is the whole donation piece, not just donation. Sometimes people will do a Starbucks gift card or whatever it may be, but you don't have to do $300. It could be $50, it could be $25, whatever, as an organization, depending on how many you send out. But the pushback we typically get with that is that people will always say, well, a lot of our clients won't accept. They'll see that as a gift, and they can't do that. So I love that you added this line here, if you aren't able to accept a corporate gift, to let them know by emailing, and that will take you out of the drawing. So it doesn't, make them feel, not feel good about it because they can't do it or feel like they can't take the survey because of it. So I think that totally answers that objection. And the other big lesson learned here for me is to put the number of questions in the subject line. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you do that in a B2B environment, our average response rate for our clients is over 30%. It's about 34%. And that's about double what the average B2B response rate is about 15%. We have clients that are in that 20% range, but we also have clients that are well over 50%. And so a lot of it has to do with, number one, how you communicate this, but number two, how involved is the rest of your staff in trying to garner those responses, because that can make a big difference too, right? If people know that this is core, that you're going to be doing a lot with this information, they're usually willing to give you literally, 3 minutes of their time to answer 7 questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fantastic. Good examples. So here, Leah, let's launch our next poll. So do you segment your experience or your data to provide additional insight? And is that by division or department, sales group, location? Do you segment it by division and manager? Do minor segmentations, or are you not segmenting at all?
So the poll is now open, and really the gist of this is to understand, are you just doing one broad survey, or are you using the questions or creating the questions in a way that are going to help you provide more segmented data later? So Eric can share some best practices there, but a lot of clients, and Eric has seen a lot of clients have success when you can pinpoint the survey responses back to that particular manager or sales rep or service line and help to tweak things from there. So we have about 71% of the attendees voted. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds. If you are looking at the screen, you should be able to choose one of the options, and we will look at, right now, there is a decent amount of segmentation. So 35% are segmenting by division and manager, followed by 29% that aren't segmenting, and then 18% each that are segmenting by division, and then other minor segmentation.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say, as we look at this, I think it's smart. I think our audience is handling this in the right manner, because it is rare for us, especially for larger organizations, it's rare for us to find something that is really an issue across an entire organization. Oftentimes, it's pockets within that organization. And the variance in experience from, say, one location or one division to the next, it can be really, really dramatic. It's not uncommon for us to see, we utilize Net Promoter Score, which is just a simple metric that asks, would you be willing to recommend this company? And a good Net Promoter Score is, probably 50% or higher. World class is 70%. Pretty poor is 30% or lower. And we'll have cases where it's not uncommon for somebody to have in one location an 80% Net Promoter Score, and in the other location they might have all the way down to an 8 or a 10% Net Promoter Score. So it's really important to be able to look at, hey, overall, how are we doing? What are the things that are important to look at and change? But does that really hold true as you break down into different segments?
And I think that to that point of understanding, how it's different by geography or within a specific group, and we'll talk about marketing a little bit later, how you use this data, but a lot of times people look at this operationally and, what do they need to do to improve different things, but it's also important to look at how will that help inform your decisions and how you go to market in different areas. So would maybe one market need more support in a certain area based on feedback they're getting than another market? So just overall investment-wise kind of help inform those decisions as well. So when you get the data and the insights by division and you happen to get some negative feedback, what do you do in that case? What is some of your advice or best practices that you've seen as far as how people handle that review, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's coming. The reality is that none of us run a company that is completely absolved from delivering a bad experience from time to time. We all make mistakes. And the reality is that for most customers, the mistake is not what they remember. It is the recovery or the lack of recovery that really is there. So you really need to have a triage plan in place. And the idea that, look, we don't look at our recovery. We don't have a formal plan in place for how we recover when something goes wrong. Because if we do our process, something won't go wrong is asinine. You know, that's the equivalent in my mind of not having ambulances at the racetrack, because if everybody just drives right, nobody should run into each other, right? I mean, it's just, it's not realistic. You have to understand that it's going to happen. And the first thing that I would say is it's really, you know, pick up the phone and show empathy right out of the gate. You can diffuse a lot of frustration right out of the gate by just saying, Leslie, I realized that yeah, this didn't come through like we were expecting it to. That's got to be so frustrating to you, and I just want to say I'm really sorry. That's not how we generally do business, and here's what I'm going to do about it. Right? If I can do that right out of the gate, then I've diffused a lot of the anger there, because I've told you that, number one, I understand that it's a problem. Number two, I'm going to work to find a solution. And number three, and most important, I've given you permission to be frustrated. So you don't have to convince me that you deserve to be frustrated. That's already off the table. And so you can then start to look at that. And then the last advice I would give on that is you just have to make sure that the recovery is really memorable, and that it's memorable to the individuals involved. A lot of times we say, well, if we're going to do this, then you know, we're going to make things right with the business. But the reality is that somebody made the decision to use your firm. Somebody's reputation internally took a hit. Somebody had to recover internally because you put them at a detriment on that. So you need to really recognize that piece of it as well. It's not just a faithless company that you have to get right with. You have to get right with the individuals involved as well.
That makes sense. And one thing, oh, go ahead, Leah.
Oh, there was someone that added, Ben, a question on the question pane here. Do you think that a handwritten note is as effective as a call? How would you weight those?
I don't. I don't think a handwritten note gives the ability to react and to gauge the tone of the individual on the other side of that. I don't think it's a bad step. It's frankly better than a lot of things that go. But what I would want to do and what I would coach that person to do is to pick up the phone, have that conversation, recognize what's going on. And the other two, the speed to which you have that call is important as well, because if something goes wrong and it's time sensitive and you call 2 days later to apologize, that's going to be much less impactful than if you can call right at the start. And a lot of times people want to wait until they have a solution before they actually make that call, and that's the wrong way to go about it. You really need to make that call quickly.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
I would say I heard you, Eric, presenting at the Career Builder kind of client executive forum about a month ago now, I guess. And one thing that you said really stood out to me, which was, in addition to the survey, to really have a marketing plan or a plan in place in general operationally to deal with reviews on any platform. So making sure with Glassdoor, with Facebook, with any review site, any medium that you have to kind of carry this process throughout all of that. And Leah and I were in Boston the last 2 days. We did a TechServe presentation, and someone had mentioned about a negative review on Facebook, and somebody had written something about someone, and literally it was walking through these same exact steps, and maybe the phone call was more of a comment back to them on Facebook, but having that empathy, correcting the problem, really making that recovery memorable in writing. So if it's a review online, being able to show when you can on the right medium that you're addressing it, you're on top of it, you're timely, that you're understanding, but you leave that kind of memorable experience with them is really important. So I would just kind of take some advice I heard from you before, which was, be sure to have this type of plan in place for, all of the mediums that you could possibly have a review, and be sure to check that. So with that, kind of looking on the flip side to a negative review, of course, there's always opportunities for positive commentary as well. How have you seen people use that, and what suggestions do you have to leverage the positive?
Yeah, so we did a study recently with B2B buyers across a number of industries, and what we found is that client testimonials are actually second to referrals in terms of how much they're trusted as a source when somebody is purchasing B2B services. And yet most of us do not do a good job of gathering and capturing those testimonials. And the survey is actually a great opportunity to do that. And there's a whole spectrum of how you can approach that. First of all, your 9s and 10s, if somebody's giving you high scores, they're telling you, look, I'm a passionate advocate of what you're doing, and it's okay to ask me for a testimonial. It's okay to ask me for a referral. And so they've opened that door. And whether you actually automate that process, which is something we've started to do now, where if we get that 9 or 10, we ask them as part of the survey to provide that as a testimonial, or whether you just have a plan in place for how you're going to treat those loyal consumers, which is a lot about what we're going to talk about here in a minute. You need to recognize, identify, and have a plan for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Leah, let's launch the next poll then. But just to find out from everyone on the call, do you ask clients for permission to use their quotes during this surveying process? So real simple, yes or no with that.
And while this is going on, Leslie, I'll just add one thing to this, which is I think it's really important and often overlooked how much people that have had a great experience with you want to see you succeed. And in many industries and many of our clients, we see that really come through. For example, with about 70% of our clients, 70% of their promoters will allow them to use their comments as a testimonial, which is a huge percentage when you think about it. And so I think you really have to build that in.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we were talking about this the other day that, you know, one of the biggest challenges on the sales side is that they know that their client probably in their agreement said, you know, we won't do a case study, you can't use our name in public, we won't do a testimonial. So they automatically go to, I don't want to disrupt the engagement, or I don't want to, you know, upset the client. You can use this as an opportunity to kind of take that pressure off the sales rep and really leverage, you know, that positive experience and relationship to get those testimonials and get that permission in a different way. Oftentimes the agreement's up front, they haven't worked with you yet, they're not sure, you know, if the service will be great, why should we give you this quote? But at this stage of the game, they, you know, if they're a raving fan and they believe in you and they believe in what you're doing, they're more likely to say yes.
So you'll see on the results that it's pretty much split. 57% are asking for that permission, but there's still a big opportunity as 43% are not.
That's great, and you know, we talked about how we do this now, and a couple things that I'll point out. The first of which is that you need to make sure that you're only asking that of your promoters, which kind of goes without saying. But the second thing, and this goes to what Leslie was talking about, is you need to give them the option to give that testimonial anonymously. And this gets back to the segmentation question earlier, and actually gives us a nice kind of a nice transition here to start talking more about the marketing side of things. But really, as you look at this, the most impactful thing about a testimonial, unless you have a Nike or a really well-recognized brand that's giving you the testimonial, is not who gave it, but what industry they're in, and that the testimonial actually hits something that is an issue that they're dealing with. So let's kind of make that transition, Leslie, and start talking a little bit about how to use this in the marketing side of things. So, you know, let's. It's kind of, you know, we go through this. Can you talk about it maybe just a little bit out of the gate? You know, how do you see clients effectively using customer feedback as part of their marketing strategy? What are the mechanisms in place to make that transition from operations to marketing and business development?
Right. I mean, it's interesting. I was talking to a client the other day and looking at, you know, what type of questions should they ask in the survey. And, you know, there's kind of the basic customer service questions. And like you said, you don't want to necessarily ask more than 10 questions, but you have to ask yourself, why am I doing the survey? What am I trying to get out of it? And a lot of times it's operational down to, the market, the salesperson, the delivery, and so forth. But how can you leverage that from a marketing standpoint? And I'll just give one quick example. So a lot of companies, especially professional services, offer different types of services and solutions. And oftentimes what they're finding is that clients aren't familiar a lot of times with all of the services that they're offering. So they're leaving business on the table, and opportunities for cross-selling across divisions or cross-selling across products or software tools and whatnot are often overlooked. So when you think about what am I as a business trying to get out of this, obvious things are the satisfaction level, a testimonial, but what operationally are you seeing not working that you want to kind of gut check and validate by doing a survey? And oftentimes looking for opportunities to expand into existing accounts is a great opportunity to get that level of logic or detail, so kind of validating your gut feeling with what's real. So the cross-selling example is really an opportunity to say, did you know that we offer X, Y, and Z services? And they'll say, yes or no. And if it's no, you can then dig into a little bit deeper about, well, what's happening on the sales side here? From a marketing standpoint, are we properly communicating everything that we do? Are we making it clear that we offer these services? Are we focusing too much on one more than another? And in the sales cycle and, sales process, how are our sales reps positioning it? And is that just in one market? Is it across all markets? So really, the point is you're looking at operations, but what we often uncover is there's opportunities to really target your marketing efforts and be very focused and specific on something that may be missed. And oftentimes that's as simple as we didn't even know you offered all of those services. A rep will get in by selling one thing, they're really focused on that, and then all of a sudden you're leaving business on the table. So that's just one example, but I think the key thing is going into this, what is it that you want to get out of it? A, that top line, and B, what are you feeling like I can really just, I'd love to validate this and see, what the clients are saying, and then just target your marketing, around that, I think is very important. So not just looking at, your website, your social media, your events, your sell sheets, your case studies, but think of it as sales campaigns, thought leadership, PR. There's a lot that these surveys can actually help you target when it's looking a little bit deeper at your overall marketing strategy. So with that, Leah, I think it's a good idea to launch the next poll. So when you talk about your marketing strategy, how often do you revisit your strategy? Is it at least every 3 months, annually? Years ago, it's kind of collecting digital dust, or in some cases paper dust, depending on how long ago. And I don't have a documented marketing strategy. So those four answers.
So it is live, so if you are listening in, if you could take a second to look at the screen and choose one of these 4 options. So far, annually is winning by a landslide, followed by I don't have a documented marketing strategy, and then several people, as they chime in now, do revisit it every 3 months. So to give you a couple more minutes, if you can choose one of the options on the screen. By minutes, I mean seconds. Sorry about that. We're not going to wait minutes. So really the winner, and I'll share the results here, 44% are looking at their marketing strategy annually, but it's really split between some that don't have it at all and some that are revisiting it quite frequently.
That's interesting. Okay, so I'm happy to see, and that's pretty common. I would say that 50%, a little less than 50% actually, have a plan, and then, several people, being split between not really having one or readdressing it. I think it's great. I mean, personally, I think it's always good to readdress it as often as you can, especially if you're in a business where it's changing, rapidly, where let's say you're a software company and you have multiple product launches. We're seeing actually a lot of marketing organizations in those cases run kind of an agile marketing process within their team. So just like you would, if you were an agile software development shop, running marketing in that same exact way, where you're constantly revisiting what you're doing to make sure that it's working. In those cases, they typically have the tools and technologies to measure what they're doing and really look at metrics of what's working so they can shift and make those changes. But if you think about really, even if you're doing it annually, think about how you're coming up with what that marketing strategy is and making sure that it's tied in operationally. So marketing kind of having that seat at the table, if you will. So again, if you're doing surveys and you're, having constant, quarterly even meetings with your clients, I have found it very helpful on the marketing side to actually sit in on those sales review sessions and really listen to what's happening. So if you're internally having meetings with your sales reps where they're going through their account activity and their planning, and if you don't have marketing involved, think about getting someone from marketing involved. It really will help inform the strategy, and you kind of think of it from a very high-level brand perspective. How do you want to be perceived in the market, and what do you need to do to get there? But then also very tactical as far as, in addition to just having block and tackling pieces like an overview sell sheet or newsletters or email campaigns, things to keep in touch and keep your brand in front of clients. What can you arm, again, kind of that account penetration campaigns, or you're not opening enough new accounts, or you've got to open 100 new accounts this year. How is marketing directly tied into that with sales? That's really important. This is a screenshot that we like to use. I'm a very big at-a-glance fan, and I think Eric, actually, we operate in the same way with that thinking as far as, make it really simple and make it achievable, but, set objectives that are tied directly into the company vision or the company goals, even if it's, annually, quarterly, however often you plan to do it. If you're not doing anything right now, hopefully this looks like, okay, this is something simple and easy that I could achieve. You kind of know within your business, and again, this is just a sample. Sometimes you're in, heated competition and there's, a few different players in the market, and you really want to gain market share. How are you going to do that? Or you want to, let's say you have different divisions within your business and you want to do a better job of cross-selling within those divisions. So if you're all trying to go after the same accounts, but you're not all in those accounts, it's really an opportunity to try and leverage the people inside those businesses or your champions or your fans to help you get deeper into that account. So developing a program specific to that can help. Again, if you're struggling with new accounts, what programs can you put in place? How can you support reps? And really, in those cases, if you think about it, it's really two separate audiences. You have kind of, just to put it out, and hunters who are looking for net new business. Oftentimes, those are the new sales reps coming into an account or into your business as well. What are you doing out of the gate to arm them to open up new accounts? And then people who have been there for a while and maybe have existing accounts, what are you doing to help them to get even more business out of those accounts? So kind of looking at it from that viewpoint. And then retaining the existing client base, and a lot of that ties into what Eric was talking about earlier with the surveying and really understanding, what's important to those buyers and that client, and then areas that you can help support the markets or your business, your sales team, in making sure that you're keeping your name in front of them and you're, making sure that they're renewing, after a project ends, or if it's retainer-based business, whatever it may be, really looking at how can you stay in front of existing accounts. Oftentimes people forget to market to existing clients and they just focus on the net new, and it's really an opportunity missed and something that you can look at. So again, what are your objectives? Tie strategies directly into that. Obviously, behind the scenes, you have specific tactics and calendars and budgets with that. But have metrics that you can measure and tie back. Marketing should be held accountable. It's hard to track a lot of marketing ROI, but really, if together you have the systems in place and work closely with the sales organization, you'll know leads coming in from your website, leads coming in from events. You should be able to tie that back. Even if it was just an influencer to help close a deal, it's important to have that data to track it. And again, you can update this annually. Just make sure you have some form of a plan. Otherwise, what happens is marketing is so reactive, and you're constantly having, your phone's ringing, you're getting emails from sales reps. I need a sales pitch deck for this. I need help with an RFP for that. I need a sell sheet on this topic. I need to add a blog on this. What's happening is they're really not being able to help forward your business and progress it in a thoughtful way. They're just addressing day-to-day objectives, which, is great. You need that support, but it's kind of missing that bigger picture of taking the business forward.
So I think that actually is a great overview. One of the things I'll say, especially to the accounting firms that are on the call today, is that mode right there in that screen that we just showed, I think is absolutely great for individual shareholder plans or for practice area plans. That's a really nice way to look at that. And if you look at the tactics on the bottom, really so many of those tactics can actually be improved and informed by the voice of the client or the voice of the customer and what you've learned there, but also what specifically you've gathered from those that love you. And so I guess the question I would have to you, Leslie, is you guys do a lot with taking testimonials or taking success stories with clients and really turning that into marketing and business development resources. What do you think actually makes a good case study or testimonial? Maybe walk people through things that they need to keep in mind as they try to leverage the VOC.
Sure, and that's a great point. When you're looking at this, especially on that retain column on the far right here, is to take the purpose of this is to take what you're getting from those surveys and look at how can you leverage that information across all of your marketing activities. And, from there, there's a lot of things that you can do. And it's interesting. I think people focus a lot on, a couple things. One, when you look at getting a testimonial, while it's great, and Eric, we do love you, but sometimes you have to get beyond the we love Eric or, love the company name. And really think about what's important to your buyer. So we actually work a little backwards when doing the testimonial. We look at what are the results that we know our buyers want in working with us, and what challenges do they face when, looking for something. So, for example, we did a testimonial recently for a PR client of ours, and I knew that they had gone through a few firms before working with us. They were skeptical to hire another firm. They just had, terrible results. Didn't feel like they were getting enough out of the investments that they were making in achieving their goals. And I know that's very common when hiring a PR agency. So we wanted to focus specifically on that message for the beginning of the testimonial. We also wanted to focus on, for them at least, they were trying to gain that market share. They were actually creating kind of a new segment in the market. So we wanted to be able to show that we were able to do that for them. And then also that, reporters are now proactively, and the best way we can show a result for our work is that reporters proactively reach out to our clients for quotes and testimonials after they get to know them. So, maybe it's a 12-month time frame where they went from reporters not knowing them at all to now they're a trusted, advisor and somebody who they call and get commentary from. So for us, we look at what are those results, what's important to the buyer, and then we write the testimonial that way. So you really look at what was the challenge, what's unique, and create the quote so it's something that as somebody reads it, they can relate directly to it. So it's not, focused on a specific person or, the company only in that regard. It's not just they love them, but they give a lot of reason as to why they love them to help convince that. The other thing is to think about, going beyond just, this is a picture of a case study, which I think is great, having case studies, having testimonials, but also there's an opportunity here to, once you have that list of people, so the other thing is, make sure you do something with the data you get. So if you have that question on the survey, what are you doing with those results? So if you surveyed, 100 people and 10 said they'd be willing to do a case study or give you a testimonial, and you don't have a plan in place to actually think about, okay, let's go through and look at, from a branding standpoint, which company would be best to do, a case study with for, thought leadership and to really position us credibility-wise, which would be best for this. So think about what your game plan is with those names so you have an action. But the other thing is, people are always struggling to create content and blogs and social media posts. So think about how you can leverage and actually help them grow their brand by maybe doing things like, and we do this all the time with our blogs, is ask them to participate in a blog with you, or maybe you do a Q&A. Like Eric, I would do a Q&A blog with you on, best practices for doing surveys and being, best in class in your industry. And I would ask you 5 questions, and then, that could be via email or by phone. And then I would write a blog based on that and publish it, and, look at ways to promote that on social media, have it on the website, and share in follow-up meetings with clients when I'm talking to them about that specific topic. I can say, well, you know what, here's an example of a piece that we wrote with one of our clients that may benefit you. So you can also get creative in the way that you leverage those resources and names as well in that. So with that, go ahead, Eric.
It feels like it's key to make sure that when regardless of how you show that, one of the things that I think you guys do a good job with is really making sure that you're educating as part of that. That it's because it feels like if the marketing is too skewed towards look at how great we are, that people kind of tune out. Would you agree with that, or am I overstepping that?
No, I would agree that if you had, people know it's kind of like references, right? So when you give out a reference or you're doing a testimonial, obviously they agreed to do it because they like the work that you're doing. So that is an assumption already made at the outset of getting a testimonial. So it's important to kind of take it to that next level. And again, really think about, what is it about you that they like? What is it about the service you provided that makes them a fan of your business? So again, making sure that you look at it from the eyes of your buyer first is really important. So if it's a testimonial, they already know that they like you. They've given you permission to use their name in public to promote your business and your services. It's what about you set you apart. And again, that's where I would just break it down and really think about, why are people looking for your service? What challenges have they run into that you're trying to overcome and address, and bake that into your testimonial or case study when you're writing it.
That makes sense.
And I did launch the poll already about where people are sharing their case studies most frequently right now. So we have, if you want to add your vote, you can go ahead and do that now. But right now, the majority of people are sharing it on their website, followed by none of the above. So I think there's a big opportunity, like we're talking about today, to share some of those stories. Then followed by 13% on social media and 7% on via video.
Great. So is that everyone, Leah, who took it? Are we good to move forward?
Yeah, we can go on. Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, the interesting thing with social media, so just kind of looking at the next slide here and just kind of creative examples. So before I get into this, just looking at, how to use it creatively. So I know for us, what we recommend clients do, and we actually do for our own business, is the second we get a testimonial and we put it on our website, we notify the social media team. We immediately let them know. So on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, they can promote it throughout those mediums. And again, not the self-promotion type, but they're trying to use words and use content from it to help drive that back to our website or the client's website to get that information. So anytime you create content, whether it's a case study or a Q&A blog like I mentioned before, or a testimonial, always think of ways you can use it outside of your website. Social media is a great opportunity. Email signatures with links to different things. Make sure you're getting the most mention in newsletters, the most out of those tools.
I think with that, given the time, I'll ask one last question, and maybe we can see if there are questions from the audience here as well, because I want to make sure we have time for their questions. But as you look at this and you see what people do consistently with their testimonials or when they create content or case studies, that includes sort of a voice of the customer or client aspect of it. What are the biggest mistakes that you see, Leslie? You probably see, you know, a lot of that where you have to come in and sort of nudge people to do it in a little bit more effective. But for the audience here, what do you see as the biggest mistakes to avoid?
Right. I mean, I would say, you know, first and foremost, just mistake-wise, is I think people just don't take advantage when, you know, when you're doing the survey and you're getting results back and you're seeing that people are willing to do it. The number one mistake is not following up with them and actually not doing something, which sounds ridiculous, but it is one of the things that we see happen often, is that they'll have this list of 20 or 30 people who said that they could, you know, that they're willing to be a champion for you, and you just don't do anything with it. The other mistake I would say is just not taking advantage of what you create. So like just using it over, you know, making it too self-serving and not something that the buyer or prospect would find interest in. Not sharing it with the team. So if marketing has it, they get those 20 company names, and then all of a sudden nobody within your entire company even knows that it exists because they're not constantly going to your website every day. You know, sharing internally those stories is really important, and then giving them an opportunity to share it with their networks by giving them sample posts and so forth to promote on that as well, I think is really important. And then kind of what you're seeing here on this slide is taking those testimonials and, you know, using it on your LinkedIn company page, you know, adding pictures to it to make it a little bit more personal, creating an ad out of it, you know, with that as well. So, you know, there are creative things that you can do and not just use it on, you know, in one medium of your website. But the biggest mistake is not doing anything with it at all. And then the second I would say is not sharing it internally and really communicating with everyone that it's there and making them, you know, proud to be part of the company, but also an opportunity to share within their networks as well. So I think that's really important. Video, you know, everyone, unfortunately, video keeps kind of on the lower end, and you'll see here, this is Sure Payroll. Here in videos, you know, still remain one of the highest click-through points on a website. So you can tell just by looking at these video clips, they're not high-end production pieces. It can be actually through this same medium that we're doing today. We just did a video through a GoToMeeting opportunity as well. You can set that up and record it. You can record it through your iPhone. There's a, you know, Google Hangouts. There's a lot of different technologies that you can use to figure out a way to record a video testimonial, and people expect today that it's not going to be this huge production, and video still remains, you know, pretty important as well. So, Leah, in the essence of time, let's skip through and go ahead and just kind of recap and open up for Q&A.
Great. So, Eric, there is a question for you, kind of going back to the first aspect of the webinar before we get to the data for the surveying. One attendee wanted to know what factors should be taken into consideration when you're choosing the target client population for the survey. Should they survey?
That's a great question. So how wide of a net do you cast? And it's interesting because a lot of times people will want to really focus in on their top 100 clients, or they'll want to focus in on just the key decision maker. And I personally believe that both of those are mistakes, or at the very least they're suboptimal, because one thing that we know is, actually it was a great Harvard Business Review article written a couple of years back looking at the lifetime value of a client, and essentially saying that you really need to count in their referral value as well. And actually a lot of your best referral sources are some of your smallest clients. And so you need to make sure that you're reaching out to that smaller audience as well, because there are a lot of people down there that can either help your brand immensely or hurt your brand immensely based on the experiences that they're having. The other thing that I would say is that go deeper than just the key decision maker. When the study that we did a couple years back, we found that about 2/3 of the time, the decision about which B2B provider to utilize is made as a group. And so you have to assume that even that key decision maker is getting influence from others. And the experience difference and the gap between what the key decision maker thinks and what the rest of the day-to-day contacts think or their peers think can be really, really big. So you want to cast that net wide. There's really not a reason not to if you're doing it electronically anyhow.
Sure. So another question coming, and maybe this goes to Leslie when we're thinking about marketing it, is when you're in an industry where they really do want the confidentiality or feel like it's competitive, that they don't want to put their name next to the testimonial, are there ways to promote that best? So maybe, you know, if you're thinking about just using the company name or just using a company in financial services, what do you recommend for those cases?
Right. I mean, a lot of time, you know, you have to weigh, obviously having the name in the company is probably the best result that you can get and use, but obviously a lot of the larger companies, especially, you know, if you're in a highly regulated industry, they're not necessarily wanting to share everything that they're doing. So you could always ghost or take out the name and just use a title or, you know, title and industry and just take that out. It's still good. It doesn't hold as much weight, but it's better than not having, you know, anything. The other thing is just, you know, through doing those kind of Q&A blogs or looking at ways where they're kind of, they're not really giving you a testimonial, but they're lending credibility by associating their brand with your company. Those can be ways to get around it as well. So if you ask them for, let's say you're doing an industry survey and you're publishing results on that, and you want to get a perspective from different people or executives in the industry and include quotes from them on that, you could include that as part of your piece. So it's your brand, their name, their brand. It's not necessarily a testimonial, but it's associating their brand with you. So, you know, there's either ghosting it or finding a way to lend credibility by using the brand when it's not necessarily a direct testimonial. The other thing is, you know, in sales pitch decks and using it in person, you know, what I have seen a lot of people do is put it in the PowerPoint presentation that they're presenting in person, but then take out those slides when they send a copy of the deck to the client. So a way to be able to, or to the prospect, so a way to be able to use it without fully using it. Or you can provide in your deck, you know, a list of references. So it may not be a testimonial, but again, you can list the name and the title and the company name as a reference to automatically give you that credibility because they approved that they would be a reference, but maybe not give a testimonial. And if they're approving to be a reference, then, you know, again, they're willing to say good things about your business. It should be a little creative.
Great. So we're actually out of time and over time, so I wanted to thank Leslie and Eric for agreeing in our little bit of an experimental webinar today, but I hope that you were engaged, and we're going to follow up with a survey so you can give you our candid feedback as well, and hopefully we will then incorporate that into our marketing. So I am going to also send you the slides after the fact, but thank you again for your time, and we appreciate, you know, spending the day with us. Have a good one.
Thank you, Leah. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Eric. Thanks, Leslie.
Appreciate it.